Hi, welcome to Vaughan at westcoatbellpottery.ca in Nova Scotia, Canada. And this is going to be a video of me throwing some very tall pieces. So if you want to learn how to throw a tall piece, this may be the video for you. Welcome. Okay, I am going to throw some very tall forms. One of which is going to be super tall, about 30 odd inches tall. And these first ones I'm going to be throwing today are going to be lamps, which are going to be about 16, 17 inches tall. And these are going to be like 6 pounds of clay. It's B-Mix 5 from Laguna. So I'm going to show you here just how I throw a one-piece tall form from 6 pounds of clay. So the first thing we always have to do is center the clay. Sounds easy, but it's kind of hard to do that with 6 pounds of clay, let alone what I'm going to be throwing later, which will probably be about 12, 13 pounds of clay, if not 22 pounds of clay. So this is the easy one. And coning, which is what I'm just doing here, is a way of making the clay more consistent, because sometimes when you open a bag of clay you might have a dry area in it or a softer area, and wedging is actually a good way of getting rid of those unevenness in the clay. But you can also do it just by throwing it on the wheel and coning it up and squashing it down, and that works pretty good. If I do it 2 or 3 times where you cone it and push it down, I've actually called it wheel wedging, because you are stretching the clay and compressing it multiple times. But the goal is to get it perfectly in the center so that you can poke a little hole in like I'm doing now. And try using your 2 fingers on top of each other on your right hand there. I often put my third finger over my second finger and press down, and it kind of makes it a little easier than just using your middle finger. And leave about, well, if it's going to be a lamp like this one, you go right through the bottom. So you don't need a bottom in a lamp base, because you need to get your arm up inside it when you do the wiring. So I've actually poked my finger right through to the wooden bat. When you add water, make sure it goes down the inside and the outside, so that you can actually have a very evenly smooth wall, so that when you start to pull like this, you can change that wet spot that's right above your fingers. So every rotation you should be a finger width higher up, and that way it stays wet right to the very top there. Wet it again, it's wet evenly all the way, and put more pressure on with the outside fingers here. And you are putting some pressure on with the inside fingers, but you want to make sure that there's more with the outside fingers so that you can keep the piece narrow. And make sure you follow it all the way up, and don't stop and then restart. If you can get all the way to the top, it'll stay much more even and consistent. It's a good idea just to compress the top edge too with your finger when you get to the very top, like I'm doing there. Dribbling the water right on the edge of the rim means it goes inside and outside. And now you're going to put a lot of pressure on with that knuckle on the right hand, and press in, and make sure you come up straight away so that you don't stay on a dry area, because once you rotate once, that area is dry. You must be a little higher up. Every rotation, a finger width higher up. And the wheel speed obviously gets much slower at this point. And you have to go all the way to the top, so don't stop in the middle. If it's getting dry, it means you're not following the piece. As it rotates, you should be 1 finger width higher up. And when you get to the very top, you need to put some pressure right on the edge of the rim again. Right on the edge so that it goes inside and outside. lots of pressure with those outside right hand fingers. Press deep so that you can feel a lump of clay builds above your fingers, and then you can start pushing that lump all the way up through the wall till you get to the very top. I instinctively move my fingers up one revolution, one finger width higher each time, but it'll take you a while as a beginner to learn how to do that because you're concentrating so much. And so it might be that you just have to kind of count 1 revolution, 2 revolution, 3 revolution, and so on. But it's important because you will feel if you're moving too slow, the clay gets dry. If you're moving too fast, you'll end up with a wobbly piece. If it's just right, you'll see that little wet spot just above your fingers for each revolution. And so you'll never feel like it starts to stick on your fingers. Now at this point, when you stick your left arm all the way down on the inside, you make sure that that water that's dribbling down the rim is enough and wet enough so that when you put your arm in, if it touches your upper arm, you can see the clay on my upper arm there, that tends to dry very quickly. And so you can put your arm in here and you'll feel your arm, the upper arm, sort of start to catch on the top. Especially when you start to narrow the form. So you've got to be very aware of where your upper arm is on your left arm to make sure that you're not putting any pressure on the very edge of the rim, because you can actually make it get wider just by your upper arm putting a tiny little bit of pressure on that rim. So you're trying to keep your upper arm in the middle of that hole so there's no pressure on the rim itself. This is pretty much the final pull because I'm actually going for form here, so it's actually getting wider. This is where you take a very deep breath because it's getting very thin at this area going up the wall there, so you don't want to make any sudden movements. And it's just off the picture at this point, but you're basically going to stop around there and actually kind of put a bit more pressure on now at the very top to kind of compress the rim so that it can get narrower. And if we're going to make it narrower, that means that we're not going to be able to get our arm inside here anymore. So you want to make sure you get all the water out of the piece. And drag the sponge all the way up the wall on the inside so you can make sure there's no super wet areas that can continually soften the piece after you take it off the wheel. You want to make sure there's no water left on the walls on the inside. Okay, so the inside is completely dry at this point. And we're going to have to get the moisture off the outside too. So this is a thin metal rib, a kidney-shaped rib, and I'm just going to push out. I can still get my arm in at the top, but it's very evenly dry all the way up on the inside, so I'm going to push out just a touch because I don't need to widen it very much at all, but I need to put a little bit of pressure on so that the metal rib can drag the water off on the outside. If I did this without my hand on the inside, I could end up buckling the wall. So you need your fingertips to be pressing right opposite the rib. And don't rush it, just kind of make sure that you're getting a nice even curve. And once this moisture is off, then you know the wall isn't going to get any softer. But you can see the rippling there where it is very thin. And I'm using the point of the rib just to give myself a tiny little edge where I'll know where I'm going to be working from for the flattening, because I have to flatten the top of this lamp now. I have to go and get a hole. All that will be left will be about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch hole at the top. So my fingertips are just working on the rim with as many points of pressure as I can get. Usually 4 to 6 fingers are actually pushing in, and my fingers all the way around are just compressing that rim. So there's enough lubrication so that it doesn't stick to my fingertips. And I don't dribble water on it anymore, I just use a wet sponge just to moisten the area where I'm pressing. And this has to be done with a lot of patience, you don't want to rush it. And you try to keep a curve in this flat area that actually is a curve that's kind of convex rather than concave, otherwise it could start to collapse. I've got 2 or 3 fingers on my left hand inside the hole, so I can feel as the hole gets smaller that it's time to remove one of those fingers, and then I'll just have 2 fingers inside the hole, and my fingertips of my left hand are pushing up underneath my fingers from my right hand, which are pressing down, but more pressure is applied with the right finger. So I keep working that with my fingertip on the inside and fingertip on the outside. Just a light pressure so that I'm pushing clay towards that center hole. So eventually I'll have enough clay just as a tiny little vertical wall there where I can actually take my second finger out and just leaving one finger where I can actually press, and so that my finger is feeling the clay rotating all the way around it. And you see the flat area on top still has a convex shape. It isn't actually sinking, which is really good news. And I actually have to throw 8 of these forms today because I'm making a series of seascape lamps. You know, just keep a little bit of moisture so it doesn't feel dry, but you want to make sure you don't dribble enough moisture. You know, I mean, that's why I use a sponge or just the moisture on my fingers to actually give it enough slipperiness so that it doesn't catch to my fingers. And then I've got one finger in that hole at the moment. I'm just recompressing the clay to make sure that that is actually dense. You know, as far as an edge there, it's actually quite dense, so we won't end up with any thin cracks appearing at the top. And get all the water off that then, because this is a very thin area. And then you can try and use the edge of the rim to actually put a tiny little compressed flatness area there. And I've made a little indent there because that's where the vase cap will fit. Those little round brass discs that you put on the top of lamps will go right on that top edge there. And give yourself a nice edge marker here so that it adds to the form a little bit. So I'm just using the wooden edge of the wooden rib here to redefine the bottom of the lamp. I give myself like a double edge as a bottom foot to the lamp. It just finishes off nicely right on the bat. And just getting all the moisture now off the bat so that this thing can dry out as fast as I can get it. And now I'm just going to throw another 8. Okay, I'm going to have to do this on my wheel where I can wedge my elbow in here, because a big piece of clay like that is kind of tough to center. But basically, make sure you got a clean bat, dampened like that, so it's just a little damp, and then so I'm going to just do this till it catches on the wheel head, because now it's turning the wheel head, so we know that the clay is actually attaching to the wheel head. So you're trying to make your job easy peasy. Anyway, that's fairly round. So now I have to huff and puff and blow the house down. Now, chest my elbow, it's a good position so I can get some extra oomph from this wall on the left side of me here. Get everything positioned so my body's good, and then just go for it. So, okay, this is my squeaky wheel, so I'm going to put you on this separate audio track so we don't have to listen to the wheel squeaking. The reason I keep this wheel is it's a really old 35-year-old Brent, and it can center over 100 pounds of clay. So it's a great wheel. It just has a little issue with its electric motor, I guess, squeaking. But anyway, we have to center this large 22-pound ball of clay. And this is going to be the base of my large pedestal base for a bird bath. So obviously it's really hard to do something like this. So what you do is you manipulate it a little bit at a time, and you cone it up to try and get the clay to be as consistent as possible by stretching it, and then when you push it back down you will end up recompressing it. And you can often burst out some air bubbles when you're doing this, but the idea is just to kind of stretch the clay and then recompress it, and it helps to loosen up the molecules so that it will actually center easier. I'm using the heel of my hand rather than my fingertips here, so I don't put in lots of, like throwing rings. Once you get throwing rings, your fingers tend to slot into that space and follow the same ring all the way up. So if you can use the heel of your hand when you're doing this, it avoids that kind of issue. And that's basically to make it sort of equally moist all the way over the whole piece. So rubbing your hands all over it before you go for the big pressure point. And careful not to mushroom either, because you can see there's a little ring underneath where my hands are. You don't want to make that fold over and actually get a mushroom. So the heel of my left hand is pushing in to actually make sure that doesn't actually stretch out any further. And my elbow of my left arm is wedged into that wall behind. so I don't have to put as much pressure on with my shoulders. I'm still pushing with the heel of my hand to try and get rid of that little hollow area that's spinning around. So patience and it will disappear. So elbow wedged in, my left wrist is bent back, and I'm pushing in with that heel of my hand to get rid of that little ripple. And there you go, it's almost gone. And that's just a feel if are there any loose ripples at the bottom there. If I could feel little ripples in my fingers, I would use my sponge just to compress that bottom area. Okay, this is the actual measuring of the actual size that I need, because I'm going to be making 3 pieces that slot together. So it's important that I keep the measurement it's almost completely in center at this point. Okay, this looks to be pretty much perfect as far as being on center. So I'm going to measure it again from the bottom. I'm trying to maintain a certain size here because I've got to join the other pieces together. There's a little ripple about 2-3 inches up from the bottom that I'm just using the heel of my hand to try and get rid of. It's when you see that kind of a ripple, it means that there's a little loose, less dense particle, it'll be a bit of clay in that one area. And it could be an air bubble, or it could be just a slightly softer piece of clay. And if you fold it over by mushrooming, you can end up with a little ripple just because of that. Just give us a final measure now. Yeah, that looks perfect. Now I'm holding a piece of sponge in my fingers to give myself a little extra moisture, because if I'm squeezing the sponge, that means the water's coming out of the sponge and I won't have to run back to the water bucket as often. And once that little reservoir at the top there is actually got some water in it, that really makes it easy, because I can just use the sponge to go down into the water and pull it up the wall without releasing to go back to the bucket. It just means you've got a little bit longer before you have to go get more water. And I'm pushing down, and I want to leave a fairly thick bottom because these pieces are going to go outside them. There, it's a bird bath, so basically I think we're going to make sure this thing is durable. And then push down, and then when you feel like you've gone far enough down, you've got to start to pull sideways as well to open it up. But I am trying to leave about a 3/4 of an inch, about 2 centimeter thick base in these pieces. Okay, now wet evenly inside and outside, and I'm holding the sponge in my right hand, and I'm going to start a pull now. So pull up, and I've got to make sure I follow that wet spot all the way to the top. And the sponge is in my hand, so I can actually add a little moisture as I'm squeezing the sponge. Now I haven't wet the outside because it's evenly moist all the way up, but I'm holding the sponge on the inside this time to give myself a little extra moisture on the inside. You don't always have to make the clay completely wet to do a pull. If it's evenly moist all the way up on the outside there, I don't need to add water. My finger will still slide. It's when you get things going off center, it's because your fingers will feel a slippery spot, then it'll drag on a dry spot and then be slippery and then drag again, and that's when it goes off center. As long as you get it evenly wet or evenly moist all the way up, you can do a pull without adding water, as long as the clay is fairly soft. So this is the knuckle throwing element that I do quite a bit when I'm throwing big pieces. And then compress the rim a little bit. And getting the water out of the inside at this point. Dribbling down inside and outside just to make sure it's evenly moist. I'm going to try and get a little bit more height out of this piece because this was a big piece of clay. So an outdoor piece, is going to be going through wind and hail and all the other stuff. So you've got to make sure that you don't actually make them thin and delicate when it's meant for the outdoors. And this is the upper section of it's the middle section of the piece actually. So there'll be a piece underneath this and a piece on top as well. Okay, we're making sure it's wet now, inside all the way down and on the outside all the way down, so that we can do this last pull so it's really evenly moist. I want to make sure we don't go off center at this point. So now using the knuckle again to pull up to grab any last little bit of thickness that we have down there, so we can get as much height out of this as possible. My goal is to try and make these pieces about 14-15 inches tall. We're trying to get around a 28-30 inch finished height for this piece. So I'm going to do it with 2 large pieces and 1 smaller collar at the top. make this pull go right to the top, so you can see the wheel rotations. My hand's going up one revolution, one finger width higher up each time. Measuring the bottom again just to make sure this is the size that of the middle piece, so that bottom I'll have to make the top of the bottom piece will have to be a little bigger than this part here. And now it's a matter of just getting that moisture off that wall all the way up. And follow that rib all the way to the top edge. Get that last little bit of moisture off there. Now the top collar here does not have to have a shelf or anything built into it or formed into it, because my very top piece will have a flange that will go on the inside of that. So pretty much that's what I need for this middle piece. Okay, these are the two pieces that I threw. The one on the left is the one you just watched. The one on the right was from the same weight of clay, and the only difference is that the top of the one on the right is the same width across as the one on the left at the bottom. So the one on the left will fit inside the one on the right, just sitting on the top there. And the little collar and the actual shelf kind of thing, I'm hoping will be as seamless as I can get. But my guess is you'll see it. It's got to be durable. It's got to be secure. So I want to make sure that thing is held properly. Even though we might end up gluing these together, I'm not sure. I would actually fasten them together now, but my kiln isn't tall enough to actually get this piece. My gas kiln would be, but I'm firing these in the electric kiln. But anyway, these are the two pieces. There's one more piece that goes on the collar at the very top. Okay, I've had these drying now for 2 days, and after the first day I was able to flip them upside down a little bit. But each time I dried them, I covered up the bit that was already dry, with plastic, so that I could actually have the other end drying out and kind of even it out. So they've been dried like babying them. And now they're at the stage where I can trim them, which is barely anything anyway, and also make sure that they're going to fit. So I have this flange all the way around, and that's around about a centimeter and a half tall, and this will hold the other piece in. They both have bottoms at the moment, but the bottom piece doesn't need one, but I'm probably going to leave it mostly. I'll trim some of it out for firing, but I'll turn it upside down and trim the bottom, but basically it'll just make it more stable, so there's less chance of any warping in the kiln when I fire it. The other piece is so this is basically a leather hard pot, and I've got to be so careful I don't drop it. Oh, it's a think it's in, or is it just tight? Well, it fits in, but I think that's tight, so I'm going to shave a little bit more off on the inside of this part and a little bit more off on that, so we have a little play. Let's see if I can get it out. Yep, I got it. So where's that trimming? Oh, there it is. I don't want to shim everything off on the shelf, just a bit on the outer wall there. because when they're drying, I want to make sure, and they get fired as well, that we don't have one piece that's so tight it won't come out. And I've just thrown those inside there. I think that should be fine. When they're dry, I should be able to turn it upside down and get rid of all the mess inside. So, let's just try it again anyway, before I trim too much on this. This is so thick anyway, I can probably trim a lot off. Oh, that fit much more perfectly. So that's it. I don't need to do anything else. Now, I have made these in the past as one piece. So if I did some scratching and scoring at this point, I could actually join the two together. But for ease of transportation, why would I join them together? This piece is going to have water in it, and then a bird bath is going to sit on the top. So this will be the reservoir for the water, and the pump doesn't have to pump water up a really long way. The water can just go into the thing here, and it'll drain back in, you know, we have a functioning bird bath. So I'm quite happy that it seems to have worked really well. Piece has already shrunk 2 inches to this point. It was 28 when I started, it's now 26 inches high. I decided to flute these pieces because whenever you put these kind of lines in or any kind of texture, you get a breaking of the glaze, which is a nice decorative element. So I did it to the base, and now I'm doing it to this piece which fits in. And I did throw a 4-inch collar to make the piece a little taller. So we're hoping that the end piece is about 28 inches high altogether. I'm not sure where I got this tool from. I'll tell you who it is in a minute, if they wrote the name on it. It's a ZM Tools, and it's got 3 different fluting attachments with it when I bought it. So what I'm going to do now, I think, is I'm just going to carve a line in here to kind of level those up. So I'm going to feel for where the marks start. About there, I think. Now I'm going to make a mark and just see if I got them all. Nope, got to go higher up. And this clay is very dry, so I'm probably going to do it with my metal rib in a minute. I want to mark where it is first. A little higher up. Okay, that's where it's going to be. Then I've got these thin metal ribs that I actually never throw away because they're great for trimming, because they're just a thin piece of metal, and it makes a really easy kind of trimming tool, which only works when the clay is really dry. Not dry, but almost dry. Because it's actually making quite a bit of dust if you get any past this. And there you go, that's a nice edge to that, so it kind of gives you a defined area of, you know, different texture basically. And that's all I'm going to do to that piece, which should fit on top of the other one. We'll have a look. So this is the large bottom, so I'm going to do the same again. Feel for that. There's where the lines start, but is it deep enough down to catch most of them? Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'm just going to go a bit deeper. So that'll reflect the other piece, and here is the test. I'm going to put you back a bit. I'm going to try and put the other one on. it has still got a little bit to trim off by the look of it. I want it to be a little loose, so I'm going to trim a bit off here, and I'm also going to trim a bit off the outside of the other piece too. Okay, now it fits inside, so I'm thinking, do I need to trim any off or not? Where it doesn't rattle, it is a tight fit. So I don't need to take much off here, probably just the raised areas of that fluting I just did. I'm going to use the other tool. Much better. If there's any warping in this in the kiln, we don't want this to not fit. And that's the only danger, really. Okay, we've got a little bit of looseness, so that's what I'm after. So this is the collar that's going to go on the very top, and this will fit inside the top, so I'm going to hope that will all turn out just the right size, because we're trying to gain about 4 inches, so that it's measuring 26 inches height at the moment with 2 pieces, plus the 4 here. This is 30, and I'm hoping it will end up about 28 inches, because the 2 other pieces have shrunk a lot already, like over 2 inches. Okay, I just finished doing the added piece on top, so we now have over 30 inches in height, and hopefully it won't shrink to anything less than 28, because the bottom parts are dry. It's just the top that's still wet, which will shrink and hopefully be more flush with the actual middle piece.